I'm Robert Scoble, and I go around the world and study innovators. But are they doing their best work? Today we're going to find out how to make innovators even better with Spitfire. So who are you?
I'm Olivia Fox. I work with Spitfire and I do high potential leadership development. So what this actually means is that I work with highly intelligent executives who need to cultivate their ability to inspire, to persuade, to lead, to influence people.
The reason I found you interesting, and we did an earlier interview that a lot of people said was caught their attention, is that you're studying how innovators innovate, how the brain actually works, and you're trying to get people to do even better at that, right?
That's correct. One of the fascinating things these days with the new neuroscience coming out is that we can see people's brain at work. We can understand how physiology and psychology interact. And of course, what I'm interested in is how does this work for peak performers?
And tell me what you're learning by working with some of these executives around Silicon Valley and around the world.
In the space of innovation specifically, one of the things that's most fascinating to me is seeing how important it is to know how to fail successfully, and how only the best innovators really, and the best leaders, know how to do that.
So the whole idea of failing successfully is sort of a weird
Sounds
question.
like an oxymoron, yeah. And yet, if you look at innovation at heart, innovation requires the willingness to risk that what you're doing may not work out, because otherwise you're only going to do things that you know will work out, i.e. old things, rather than new things that you don't know what the outcome's going to be, right?
Yeah.
So far so good. Turns out that innovation is often, I think it was Thomas Edison who said that he didn't fail 999 times to invent the light bulb. He had 999 times other not quite light bulb outcomes. And in a sense, when you fail, you have to be really careful not to beat yourself up, right? If a failure leads to people's inner critics acting up, that voice inside your head that either beats you up, won't let you enjoy your accomplishments, or just what happens is that because the human brain has a really hard time distinguishing between imagination and reality, if you have an internal mental inner critic attack, your brain perceives it as if it were a real external life or death threat, and your threat response, your sympathetic nervous system, activates.
Okay. So then you're talking about the imposter syndrome, right? Where I don't believe I really deserve to be here, and you have in our first interview you talked about this, right? That Stanford students, a lot of the people who drop out have this syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. So those are actually two separate things that can kind of build on each other. The imposter syndrome is the feeling that you don't really know what you're doing, you don't really deserve to be here, and it's just a matter of time before you're found out and exposed as a fraud.
Yeah.
And as you were recalling, this hits about 70 to 80% of the population. It gets worse amongst top performers, and every time I lecture at Harvard, Stanford, Yale, MIT, especially MIT, I see the students breathe a sigh of relief at hearing that this thing actually has a name.
And why is it that people who are at the top of their fields think that they don't deserve to be there, and how does that mess up their ability to further innovate and get even further in their careers?
So there are several theories. One of the most commonly accepted is that the more intelligent you are and the more you know, the more acutely you are aware of the sum total of knowledge in your field and how little your own personal knowledge is in comparison of that.
Right.
So that's one possible explanation. What I know for sure is that when the incoming class of Stanford GSB, their business school, was asked, how many of you in here feel that you are the one mistake the admissions committee made? 2/3 of the students immediately raised their hands.
Wow.
Yeah, it was dramatic. The presidents of the University of Washington, D.C., Arizona, and Wisconsin, several of them brainstorming together, told me we lose more bright kids to the imposter syndrome every year than to almost any other cause.
So What makes it so? I know that getting into Stanford means you're at the top of your high school class, right? Only one kid out of my school got accepted. What is it that gets those kids to think that they're not deserving of getting into Stanford, and how does that affect what
The
they
innovation,
actually do?
yeah, the performance. So if you look at, I'll start with question 2. If you look at how this plays out in your day-to-day life, when, let's say you're in the middle of a conversation,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden you say something, and you think, ooh, God, that sounded stupid.
Yeah.
Right? What's going to happen to your face? What did my face just do?
Scrunch up.
It scrunches up, it winces, right?
Yeah.
So this wincing, even if it's as fast as 17 to 32 milliseconds, the person facing you is going to catch that because
Yep.
people read your face as fast as 17 milliseconds. That's one. Of course, that cringing, that was due to your own self-criticism, your own beating yourself up.
Yeah.
But they don't know that. The person facing you, all they know is that while you were looking at them, listening to them, talking to them, they saw criticism, coldness in your face. So they're going to think that all this is about them. So the first thing it does to your work interactions and to any interactions is that whenever you've got that internal self-critic playing out across your face,
Yeah.
people read it. It messes up your body language. And here's the thing. MIT Media Lab concluded after extensive studies, they could predict the outcome of negotiations, sales calls, and even business plan pitches with 87% accuracy without listening to a single word of content.
Just by looking at your facial?
Just by looking at the face and listening to the voice fluctuation. So you can imagine if you've got an attack of the internal critic or the imposter syndrome and it screws up your body language, it's going to seriously impact 87% of your interaction.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's just on the interaction that it can play.
Okay.
Okay? Then let's look at performance. What does a threat response do to your body and to your brain? When the sympathetic nervous system activates,
Yep.
the body thinks it's fight or flight, right?
Yep.
So it directs all its resources towards fighting or fleeing, activated heart rate, oxygen flow, muscle reaction, all of that it puts the resources towards, and it shuts down unnecessary functions like critical thinking, analytic reasoning, free association, and of course anything that has to do with innovation shuts down completely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what happens when you beat yourself up, when you let the imposter syndrome take over.
And this is, it's interesting. I've heard people say when you're in a crisis situation, calm down. I just watched a film on Rudy Giuliani. Can't say his last name. Giuliani, who in 9/11 had to deal with a massive crisis, and he said, "My dad taught me in a crisis to calm down, and become very calm, not to worry, about what's going on." And I think intuitively he knew that the only way to do good, make good decisions, was to calm himself down and not get his brain into that fight or flight kind of adrenaline state, right?
That's absolutely correct. If you let the fight or flight response take over, you're no longer a rational human being. Literally, your cortex and neocortex are hijacked by more primal parts of your brain.
Linda Stone's been talking to me about something similar. She calls it email apnea. She notices that people don't breathe when they're doing email. Is that something similar, that we're so involved and so emotionally charged in our email that we even forget to breathe while we're doing this kind of work?
It might be. I'm not sure. It might be.
But it seems like the two are coming at the same problem, because if we're not breathing, we're not going to make good decisions. And if we're if we have that self-doubt, we're not going to make interesting new discoveries, are we?
Yeah.
So how do you get people over that?
What now, right? What do you do? Well, surprisingly enough, the first step, just putting a name on it, destigmatizing, having a competent authority, people feel so relieved just at hearing that this has a name, that it's essentially a legacy of our genetic heritage. It's like the appendix. Sometimes your appendix gets inflamed and you get an appendicitis.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes your imposter syndrome acts up and you get an imposter syndromitis. And that's all it is. It's normal, it's natural, and a huge proportion of the population has it. Destigmatizing is step one.
Yeah.
It helps a lot. It lifts the stigma. step 2, in a sense, is de-dramatize. I find that in our cultures, we've become so uncomfortable with discomfort. We kind of expect perfection of life and of ourselves at all times. And as soon as we feel any physical sensation of discomfort, of unpleasantness, then it must be a malfunction and something seriously wrong, right? Whereas there's great performance value to be taken from the Buddhist mindset of, you know what? Discomfort's a natural part of life. And I'm actually pioneering a course at Haas Business School on innovation and leadership, and one of the key things that we're giving our students is the knowledge that the best thing you can do for your career is to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So destigmatize, de-dramatize, disassociate.
Yeah. Realize
that even though those self-critical thoughts that are in your head feel so true, they aren't necessarily valid at all. So one example is, not that long ago, we were convinced the Earth was flat. Today, well, we're not even convinced the Earth is round, we know it's kind of pear-shaped. Why would we give any more validity to any of our other thoughts? Essentially, hearing's what your ears do, seeing's what your eyes do, thinking is what your mind does. You wouldn't want to shut off thinking any more than you want to go deaf or blind, but be aware that just like there are optical illusions that trick your eyes, there can be thought distortions that trick your brain. I've had the good fortune to work with some pretty interesting companies and institutions, and what's fascinating is to see how high up the ladder this goes, and to see some of the most brilliant performers, whether it be at Stanford, whether it be at Google, who even there can feel the imposter syndrome, and even there feel that I'm just this close to being found out. And often getting them to realize that people just as successful as they, or more successful, or in the next cubicle, are having the same feeling, because it seems so ludicrous for their colleague, that helps them put some doubt as to this self-recrimination in their own head. One of my favorite work experiences was with Deloitte, and working within their audit firm at their national office where some of their brightest performers go. I had the delight of working with these bright performers and giving them tools that we pulled from everywhere, from peak performance athletics, from Buddhist meditation, from the new neuroscience that's come out, and seeing their performance ratings jump to what was internally the highest possible ratings available within 3 months. It was extraordinary.
Okay. Why is it that people can perform better just by applying some simple things?
That one's easy. If you think about it, nothing impacts your performance more than how you feel about yourself. Look at what feeling bad about yourself, look at what it can do. 1, it's impossible to be fully present in a conversation if half your brain is busy beating you up about something that you've just said or done. Right? 2, if you've got the imposter syndrome, you're always trying to prepare your next sentence in a desperate attempt to sound smart. So you're not really listening. So 1, that kills communication, and 2, how can you have a high performance team if they don't really listen to each other? 3, we've just seen it screws up your body language. Body language is, now you know, thanks to MIT studies, such a huge proportion of your communication. How can you have collaborative innovation if the communication is being broken down and warped at the body language level? And then, not to mention, as we've just seen, analytic thinking, critical thinking, rational thinking, free association, all that gets impaired by self-recrimination.
So are you saying that innovation requires the ability for us to look stupid?
And feel okay about it.
And feel okay about it?
Yes.
Why? When Edison discovers the light bulb, was he was just okay with coming up with another failure?
He was, and think of 3M. 3M, the Post-it. It was supposed to be something entirely different. It was supposed to be a really strong adhesive. Didn't work. But the guy said, you know this thing that you can actually kind of stick, but kind of not. This is kind of cool. And that failure became the Post-it note.
Yeah.
There are countless examples of failures that turned into the brilliant success.
Yeah.
So knowing how to fail successfully, knowing how to, there's nothing that will improve the quality of your days, the quality of your life satisfaction, the quality of your performance more than how you feel about yourself and how you can get your brain to perform at maximum level. And I'm just really excited that we're in the decade right now where all this science is coming out right now. Yeah. We have access to it.
I know you're working on some papers and some.
I'm terribly late on some papers. Yes.
Where are we going to see those, and what things are you presenting to the world in those papers?
I am hopefully at some point going to finally get finished the paper on the mental side of the innovation with my wonderful co-author Rob Walcott, who is the founder and director of the Kellogg at Northwestern University Business School, the Kellogg Global Innovation Network. And we're going to cover exactly this, the neuroscience of innovation, the cognitive side of innovation. In addition, I'm a columnist for Forbes magazine. They're very kind in letting me be abysmally late on my monthly columns. I think I just turned in my November column. This was for November 2009. So a few exciting things are coming out.
Yeah. I'm always late too.
Thank you.
Is it okay to be a procrastinator and be an innovator?
You know, I just have too much fun working with people directly that I don't want to do anything else, because you get to work with people. And what's fantastic is that you see people, you see metamorphoses, you see them transform. And I always tell the way I work with people, in one session, they feel the difference. In 2 sessions, other people see the difference, and in 3 sessions, they have a whole new presence. It works that fast. And when you've got something that exciting going on, why on earth would you want to go write a paper somewhere in a musty room?
Yeah. Are there some tricks that engineers and designers can use to help them deal with this? For instance, I was just over at Flipboard, which is one of my favorite new iPad apps, and they said we threw away more code than we shipped. And is going into a project, is that sort of a trick that you can use? We're going to throw away a lot of code, and that will let us innovate and come up with an interesting new idea and free us of the fact that we're always have to be successful. That we can try some things, and if they don't work out, we're going to throw them away.
Resetting expectations going in is a brilliant thing to do. And Kem Hallett, who is the CEO of Holiday Inn and is now the chairman of TEC, the executive committee, told me that they would give a bonus for failure. And the bonus for failure would actually be for the most brilliant failure that didn't work, or the most brilliant idea that didn't work. It would actually be the exact same dollars and cents as the bonus for a successful idea. That's one. 2, on a much more pragmatic, small level, if you're in the middle of a conversation and you realize that you're busy doing something else mentally, and you know that that's going to be red in your face, and at a gut level, they're going to feel, the person facing you, that something's off. Either they're going to see all sorts of nasty stuff in your face, or even if it's just a delay in your facial expression, you can come across as inauthentic. Yeah. One of my favorite things to do is get into your toes. What that means is, if you focus on your toes right now, and now you're focusing on your toes, right? You have to be fully present in the conversation, because your brain goes, whoosh, and it focuses through your body down into your toes.
Interesting.
Split second, that's all you need. You're present in the conversation, move on.
Okay.
That's one quick tip. And in the more uncomfortable and more in-depth work, we've seen some extraordinary effects of people rewiring their brain for optimal performance, thanks to techniques such as visualization that athletes use a lot, or meditation.
And you see them on Olympics, right? They'll be listening to iPad and they'll be thinking through like their dive, right? And that's really important to visualize you doing what you're about to do, right?
It's critical. Your brain, because it does not know the difference between imagination and reality, it turns out that you can actually strengthen your neuronal connections, the pathways in your brain, fire up the exact same way, whether you're imagining something or actually performing it. So athletes use this, and they can actually be wiped out, completely exhausted after an intense visualization session.
Interesting. What about like what Eric Ries talks about, which is iteration? He has this lean startup idea, and he says, I'm going to ship code 60 times a day. And by changing innovation into having to do this big thing into little tiny things, it makes it easier to innovate, right?
It's easier because it's less scary, because you're less afraid of failure, and because with a small thing, it's emotionally, there's not the same cost to not succeeding. That makes sense. Well, one of my favorite things to talk about, and what I'm always asked, since I tend to say I teach charisma and the ability to inspire and persuade, and often engineers come to see me and they say, but I'm an introvert, or I'm a hopeless case. And what I tell them is, listen, I'm one of the most socially inept people that you'll ever meet. But the great thing is that now, human interaction, charisma, the ability to inspire and lead, it's being broken down into a science. If you're willing to learn it, anyone can become charismatic. I'm not saying you're going to become Bill Clinton.
Or Steve Jobs.
Or Steve Jobs. But anyone can improve in spades. And you can learn it really fast. It's really fun. And you see the effects awfully quickly.
Yeah. Crazy. I don't know that I could be Steve Jobs. And there's my imposter syndrome again.
There you go.
Keeping me from being who I might be, right? Well, thank you so much. Where do we learn more about you on
Thank
the web?
you. You're very welcome to come visit the website. It's pretty simple. AskOlivia.com. That's AskOlivia.com. There's a lot of cool stuff on the blog, including on the imposter syndrome.
Very cool. Thank you.
Thank you.